At a remote military base in Alaska, we discovered a sinister, haunted secret. It's spine-chilling. The snow fell heavy upon the Parker family's new home, thick flakes swirling in a choreographed dance while dark woods loomed like watchful shadows. Sarah Parker felt a chill run down her spine, an unsettling premonition prickling at her skin. She glanced at her children, Emily and Jake, their innocent eyes wide with wonder. They were excited, envisioning adventure in the stark and isolated military base where Mark, their father, had been deployed for what they believed was just a routine tour. But as night fell, the thick silence of the base pressed down on them, a foreboding weight that made Sarah's heart race. The wind howled outside, its eerie whispers slicing through the stillness, filling her with dread. Had she made the right choice uprooting her family? As she settled into a routine, the dread morphed into something darker. Whispers echoed through the house, soft yet persistent. "It's just the wind," she told herself. But her children were convinced it was a friendly ghost and often chatted about it with fervor. They claimed it watched over them, warning of danger. Dismissing their innocence as mere imagination did little to erase the chill creeping down her spine. "Mom, the ghost says something bad is coming." Emily's wide eyes glinted with terror as she clutched her teddy bear. "Just stories, honey," Sarah replied hesitantly. But that uneasy feeling lingered. The sensation of being watched didn't leave her. Shadows flickered out of the corners of her vision, and reports of strange lights dancing in the sky buzzed among the families on base. The children's talks of their ghost turned from light-hearted to frantic as unsettling incidents began to unfold around them. Military operations went haywire, personnel went missing, and friends turned odd, casting wary eyes Sarah's way. Were they hiding something? She dug deep into historical records and unearthed chilling whispers experiments conducted in the name of national security. The base was cloaked in secrets, dark forces at play. Mark's shadowy dealings were becoming clearer, his presence at odd hours and strange phone calls filling her with unease as other families fled the base. Leaving everything behind in a hush, Sarah felt the walls closing in, the air thickening with dread. She turned to the children, who had grown disturbingly attached to their ghost. "Emily, Jake, we need to stick together. Promise me?" Their nods felt more like a plea than reassurance. Then one evening, her heart raced as she found a letter slipped beneath the door, a direct warning. Every instinct screamed to leave, but she couldn't abandon her husband. The ghost morphed in her mind, a harbinger of doom rather than a protector. The wind howled louder, shaking their fragile home as she gripped the railing, heart pounding. It was too late for comfort. The horrors they faced were real, lurking in the shadows of authority and trust. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The sense of safety had evaporated. Chills washed over her as she looked at her children, their faces reflecting increasing fear. Whatever supernatural forces they believed in, something more sinister overshadowed this place. Sinking dread filled her chest as Sarah took in the shadows, whispering secrets too dark to unveil. A new realization dawned. The true danger was not the ghost, but the invisible threat surrounding them, pulsating just beneath the surface, clawing at their sanity. Suddenly, what was a mere ghost story turned into life or death. Would they escape this haunted nightmare, or would the sinister secrets of the base consume them whole? Night wrapped around the Parker home like a suffocating blanket. Sarah lay awake, her body rigid against the expanse of their new bed. Each creak of the house echoed in her ears, a lingering reminder that they were not alone. The whispers grew closer, more distinct. She strained to catch the words but only felt a frigid chill that crawled beneath her skin. "Mom?" A soft voice broke through the stillness. Sarah turned, heart racing, to see Emily standing by the door, clutching her teddy bear, eyes glassy with unshed tears. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Sarah whispered, forcing a soothing tone. The ghost is scared. Her words were barely above a whisper, trembling with dread. Scared of what? The thing that came last night. A breath caught in Sarah's throat. She had tried to dismiss the children's endless chatter about their friendly ghost. But a creeping realization gnawed at her. This wasn't innocent childhood imagination. Something was very wrong. Let us sit, she said, beckoning Emily over. As they cuddled together on the bed, the wind howled outside like a wounded beast. They say it watches us, it knows what's coming. Emily continued, her voice shaky. It told me. Mom, it said we have to leave. A cold wave washed over Sarah. Leave? Why would we leave? Emily's finger pointed towards the window where the shadows danced, forming shapes that twisted and turned like grotesque puppets. Because it's coming for you. The thing in the woods. Before Sarah could respond, an eerie, chilling silence enveloped them. The wind had stopped. Even the rustling of the trees outside ceased. It felt unnatural, like the world had just paused, holding its breath. Stay here, Sarah whispered urgently. She rose, heart hammering wildly as she crept towards the window. Peering outside, she could see nothing but thick fog swirling around the trees, obscuring any view of the looming forest. And yet, there it was, a faint glow deep within the woods, pulsing like a heartbeat. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the front door. Sarah flinched, jumping back. It sounded too deliberate, too ominous. It wasn't the wind this time. It felt like a force demanded entry. Jake! Sarah called, her voice trembling as she rushed back to Emily. Stay close. Moments later, Jake emerged, his young face furrowed with confusion. What's wrong, Mom? I heard a noise. Just stay together, Sarah instructed, her voice firm but laced with fear. They huddled close, listening intently. The silence was oppressive and heavy, almost alive, as if the house itself were holding its breath. But then, a figure appeared outside the window, obscured by fog. A tall silhouette, draped in shadow, stood just beyond the glass. It was no mere supernatural trick. It had substance. Sarah's heart dropped. Mommy! Jake cried, hiding his face against her side. I don't know who that is. Sarah stammered, desperation clawing at her throat. We have to lock the door. Fingers trembling, she turned to face the door as the knock came again, harder this time, insistent. She barely reached the latch when the thud transformed into a rattling. Panic surged through her veins. Suddenly, the whispers returned, but now they felt coiled around her mind, drowning her in an overwhelming chorus. Open the door, they beckoned, blending together like a sinister chant. And then the voice broke through, clearer than the rest. It was unmistakably Mark's, strained and desperate. Sarah, open the door, please. The warmth and safety of her husband's voice only fueled the confusion as doubt crept in. Was this really him? Or something wicked, shape-shifting into the form of her husband? The fear of knowing the truth weighed heavier than the uncertainties. As she battled her instincts, the whispering grew frantic, echoing with urgency. Someone was coming for her family. Time twisted and stretched as Sarah held her breath. Would she open the door and reveal the truth, or succumb to the shadows and their terror? The decision hung above her like a dark cloud, and in that moment, she saw the faint glow in the woods flare brighter. Something else was watching. What was waiting just outside their fragile sanctuary? The questions loomed larger, and the air thickened with uncertainty as Sarah's heart raced, demanding a choice she didn't want to make. Sarah's fingers hovered over the latch, trembling like leaves in a storm. Inside, the shadows danced and clawed at the corners of her mind, drowning out rational thought. Mark's voice echoed, pleading. But what if it wasn't him? Mommy, Jake whispered, clutching her shirt tighter. His small body trembled against hers, reflecting her own fear. Emily, stay close, Sarah instructed, reluctant to take her eyes from the darkened window. Suddenly, the glowing pulse from the woods intensified, illuminating the fog in unnatural hues. Shapes began to emerge, twisting and contorting, more than just shadows. The whispers rose again, a cacophony of pressure as they pressed against her mind. Open the door, the growling wind outside resumed, howling like a beast that had been awakened. The lights in the room flickered, casting erratic shadows across the walls. "Sarah," Mark shouted again, urgency lacing his tone. "Please, let me in." Her breath caught in her throat. Panic surged through her veins. She was torn between two nightmares, the monster lurking outside and the one inside, urging her to trust the familiar voice. "Mom, it's not him." Emily's voice broke into her thoughts. "You can't let him in. It's a trap." But it felt so real, so desperately alive. The love she had for Mark battled against the primal instinct for survival. The dark shape at the window shifted, inching closer, revealing more of its form. A twisted silhouette, long limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally. "Mommy," Jake whimpered, the innocence in his voice piercing through her hesitation. The knocking intensified, sounding more like fists pounding against flesh than fingernails against wood. In that moment, the whispers converged, a dark tide crashing against her mental defenses. "Open the door," without thinking. Sarah stumbled back, forcing herself to breathe. "We have to go," she shouted, her voice tinged with fear. "We can't stay here." "Where?" Jake's voice cracked. The glow from the forest flickered again, and she felt an icy hand grasp her heart. "The car!" she exclaimed, pushing them toward the bedroom door. She had to get them to safety, away from whatever was lurking outside. With hesitant steps, they crept into the hallway, every creak underfoot sounding like thunder in the silence. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the house itself were trying to pull them back into its clutches. "Mom, the basement," Emily said, her small voice quaking. "They say it's safe there." "Not the basement." Fear twisted like a knife in Sarah's gut. "We're not going there." Unsure yet driven, they raced to the front door. She hesitated, her hand hovering just above the knob. The pounding grew louder behind them. Then there it was, a sudden burst of blinding light from the window. An unnatural luminescence swallowed the entire room in shimmering horror. Something was pushing through the fog, something alive, something waiting for them, eager to feast on their fear. With no choice left, Sarah flung open the door and stumbled outside. The cold air hit her like a wall, and they stood frozen on the porch. The forest loomed before them, dark and pulsating, alive with malignant energy, the glow radiating as if it were a heartbeat of its own. "Go, go," Sarah screamed, shoving Emily and Jake forward, into the night. They ran, fear gripping them, but every step pulled them deeper into danger. Dark tendrils reached from the woods, curling like smoke, clawing at the air. But then, from the depths of the trees, a monstrous roar erupted, shattering the stillness of the night. Whatever was out there was angry, and it was hungry. What had they awakened in the woods? And could they escape its grasp before it claimed them? The question lingered in the air, electrifying and heavy, as they plunged into the waiting darkness. The trees closed in around them like a tightening noose, shadows swallowing them whole. Sarah's heart raced so fast it felt like it might explode. The sound of her children's quick breaths mixed with the rustling of leaves underfoot, creating a haunting symphony of terror. "Mom, what's happening?" Emily gasped, her small hands gripping tightly to Sarah's arm. "Keep moving," Sarah urged, desperation pouring from her voice. The soft glow from the forest pulsed, pulling at them like an insidious tide. It was a strange light, not just eerie but almost hypnotic, flickering with something dark and ominous beneath its surface. Jake stumbled, nearly falling over some unseen root. "I'm scared," he cried. "Just hold on. We're almost there." Sarah knew they needed to reach the road, but the forest seemed to shift, to conspire against their escape. The wind howled again, arming itself with a more sinister tone, echoing the roar that had just escaped the shadows. A sound behind them, crunching leaves and snapping branches, made her stop dead in her tracks. Sarah turned, her gut twisting as she peered back into the inky darkness. "Is it coming?" Emily whispered fearfully, eyes wide, darting nervously. "Shoo!" Sarah hissed, holding her breath. Silence engulfed them, an awful stillness that was more terrifying than any scream. It felt as if time itself had paused, waiting, watching. Then, in an instant, all hell broke loose. The ground shook beneath their feet like a quaking beast awakening. The dark against the backdrop of the glowing fog began to morph and reshape, as if it were not just made of wood and leaves, but flesh and nightmares. A huge figure loomed out of the haze, long limbs swaying like branches, mouth agape, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "Run!" Sarah screamed, pushing the kids ahead of her. Each ragged breath they took brought with it the stench of decay, thick enough to taste. Panic hammered inside her. They had to make it to the road. The thought of escape was all that sustained her, driving her forward as shadows breathed down her neck. "Mommy!" Jake shrieked as he stumbled again, falling to the ground. "Stay with us," Emily cried, reaching out for her brother. Seeing them faltering sent a pulse of terror through Sarah. "Get up. We have to go." She yanked Jake to his feet, the coldness of her grip like ice on fire. But then came a garbled laugh from somewhere deep in the woods, a sound that sliced through the air and whipped the leaves into a frenzy. It was low and guttural, filling the space with a sickening vibration that settled deep in Sarah's bones. "We're too late," a voice echoed in Sarah's mind, not from the woods but from the whispers she felt creeping in like a thick fog. "Let us in." "Not now," she shouted defiantly, urging her children faster as they broke into the clearing. The road was just ahead, faintly lit by the dying glow of their house. But before they could reach it, a flicker of movement caught her eye. All at once, figures emerged from the sides, flanking them like wolves. Shadows of faces contorted with malice, eyes glowing with that same unnatural light, silently beckoning her children to come closer. "No, stay back," Sarah shouted, desperately shielding them with her arms as she backed away. Something sharp and icy sliced through the air a hand, reaching out, looking for a grasp. The roar continued, drowning out reason, laughter mingling with cries echoing through the forest. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but despair had its grasp on her heart now, tightening like a vice. Suddenly, Emily screamed, "Mom! They're everywhere!" The dark figures shifted, a mass of twisted limbs advancing toward them, each step echoing with the sound of her heartbeat. Sarah felt a chill run through her. They were trapped. No way out, no options left. "We need to fight," Sarah shouted over the chaos. But as she turned, she realized her children were already ensnared by the figures, their small forms being pulled towards the light, the very thing she had fought to escape. "Let them go," she roared, lunging at the shadows. But they only laughed, a horde of darkness with no intention of relenting. As the shadows enveloped them, a horrifying thought slashed through her mind. Was it too late for their escape? She fought against the pull, screaming her children's names into the hollow air, and then silence. A deafening quiet wrapped around them, so thick it felt heavy on her chest. No cries, no laughter, only the oppressive pulse of the woods, echoing with the rhythm of her fear. Could she truly save them, or had they already been taken? The night held its breath, waiting to reveal its darkest secrets and the true horror that lay in its depths. The darkness around them was thick, a suffocating black that clung to Sarah like a second skin. She could feel the weight of the silence, as if the very forest held its breath, anticipating what would happen next. The shadows shifted, pulsating with a life of their own, an insatiable hunger that filled her with dread. Mom Emily's voice trembled, barely a whisper. It cut through the silence like a knife, a desperate plea that sent a bolt of fear through Sarah's spine. She scanned the area, heart racing, noting how the ground seemed to pulse like a living entity. "Keep close," Sarah barked, regaining her resolve. She gripped her children's hands tightly, but already felt the ice of the shadows creeping in, tugging at the edges of her courage. The figures were back, thick forms barely human, faces contorted in an eternal snarl. What they wanted was clear, her children. The pulse of the forest intensified, their laughter returning, harsh against the stillness, whipping through the trees. Sarah's mind raced. What could she do? Fighting felt futile against the relentless tide of shadow. "We have to break through," she shouted, not just to her children but to herself. The road was so close, glowing faintly in the distance, like a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. "Move," she urged, yanking her kids along. Each step felt like she was running through molasses, ground shifting beneath them, roots snaring at their feet. Jake stumbled again, panic in his eyes. "Mom, I can't. I'm so tired." "No, don't you dare stop." Her voice cracked, desperation flooding her with adrenaline. Behind them, the shadows surged, rippling like water disturbed by a stone. They could hear the whispering now, hollow voices clawing at their minds, feeding on their fear. "Come to us, join us, get away from them," Sarah screamed, wheeling around. The figures paused for a brief moment, bewildered by her defiance. But the deathly laughter erupted again, echoing in mocking delight with every ounce of strength she had left. Sarah pushed forward, dragging her children with her. The road now pulsed, just a few steps farther. But as it loomed closer, she felt a deep thrumming beneath her feet, ground being consumed by the shadows. Suddenly, the earth cracked open, fissures snaking across the path like a spider's web, reaching out for her. "No, hold on to me," she roared, clutching Emily and Jake tighter as the shadows leaped, hungry for their prey. Just as Sarah thought they would be lost to the darkness, a surge of light surged from the fissure, a beam piercing the night, illuminating everything in its path. She squinted against its brilliance, a voice echoing from within the depths, strong and commanding. "You do not belong to the darkness. Run, now." The voice bellowed, and Sarah felt the shadows recoil, a brief respite that ignited her hope. She charged towards the road, pulling her children forward, their eyes wide with fear and wonder at the sudden radiance. But as they surged forward, Sarah felt a tugging sensation at her back, a reminder of the dark force still lurking, waiting for the moment they could claim their souls. She glanced back, heart pounding, and saw the shadows reforming, angrier, more determined than ever. And the final stretch, a harsh laughter thundered, this time more menacing. "You think you can escape?" They almost reached the road when the forest erupted in chaos. The trees twisted, groaning against the strain of the malevolent energy surging around them. Sarah could sense their power, growing stronger with each step backward that the shadows took. "Faster!" she shouted, urgency lacing her voice. But the darkness was still there, relentless, a living nightmare. Emily's grip tightened. "Mom, what if we can't make it?" "We will." Sarah's voice trembled, uncertainty creeping in. But inside, something stirred, a flicker of defiance buried deep within her. As they finally reached the edge of the road, the shadows surged one last time, claws reaching for them, hungry for their fear. It was a freezing chill, enough to freeze blood in her veins, and then darkness closed around the road, snapping shut like a massive animal's jaws. Sarah felt adrenaline surge again. "We're leaving." But even as she pulled the kids toward the reassuring light of their home, she realized with dawning horror that the road wasn't just an escape. It was a barrier to something far worse, hidden beyond the trees. Had they forgotten something? Was the true horror waiting for them beyond the light? "Mom?" Jake asked, voice trembling as the shadows hissed in the distance, promising they would return. What had they truly awakened? Her heart thundered, trapped in an aura of dread. They had escaped for now, but what would happen when the morning sun rose? Sarah would find out, because the darkness was not finished with them yet. Not by a long shot. The air felt different now, like a taut string about to snap. As they stumbled onto the road, the shadows pulsed behind them, hungry and resentful. They were not just ghosts. They felt as if they were made of pure malice, an emotion that wormed its way into Sarah's gut, twisting it with a potent fear. "Are we safe now, Mom?" Emily's small voice cut through the charging adrenaline. She clung tightly to Sarah's arm, her face pale under the cold glow of the moon. As if mocking them, a low rumble resonated from the forest, a reminder that their escape was more of a temporary reprieve than a liberation. Sarah took a deep breath, forcing down the panic that threatened to suffocate her. "Stay close," she replied, trying to muster the calm in her voice. "We need to get home." With quickened steps, they moved along the road, but the woods loomed ominously close, the trees swaying as if whispering dark secrets to one another. Jake's breath came in sharp gasps as he kept looking back, eyes wide with terror, as if he half expected the shadows to leap into the light at any second. "Mom, it's not over. They're still there. I can feel them," he cried out, terror bubbling in his voice. "Stop it," Sarah snapped, frustration mixing with fear. Keeping her focus on their path, she fought the urge to look back, to challenge the darkness. Suddenly, she heard its soft, chittering laughter that clawed its way out from the forest. It echoed through the air, chilling her bones. "Turn back! Turn back, no! Keep moving," she hissed, pushing her children forward. But the sound wrapped around them, enrobing them in despair, the promise of terror hanging in the air. "Please, it's not real," she shouted, willing herself to believe it. The road stretched endlessly, an illusion of safety, and darkness seethed just behind the treeline, feeling alive with anticipation. Every step she took felt like a faux confidence, an act of defiance that wouldn't hold. Would they even make it back home? As if answering her question, a rush of wind swept through the trees, rattling the branches like bones on a graveyard fence. "Mom, look," Emily squeaked, pointing ahead into the inky black. Sarah squinted, her heart pounding as a figure emerged, half hidden behind the bushes. A woman, her face pale and luminous, looked directly at them. The figure beckoned, eyes wide and pleading. "Help me. They took me." Her voice was a whisper, a thin thread of sound that slithered into Sarah's ears. "Get behind me," Sarah cried, instinctively stepping in front of her children. The woman's lips curled into a strained smile, but it was nothing but a shadow of humanity. The shadows pushed closer, their chilling presence now palpable. "Join us, you will not escape," they whispered, a chorus of temptation drumming against Sarah's resolve. The woman's gaze locked with hers, pleading. But then a quick flash of anger twisted her features, morphing into a terrifying snarl. "Run!" Sarah shoved the kids forward, heart racing as she sprinted after them. They shattered the momentary paralysis. Behind her, she could hear the cries of the woman, a mixture of despair and rage as shadows consumed her. "Keep going," Sarah urged, but the panic lodged heavy in her throat. To abandon that figure felt like betrayal, even if it was madness to stop. A chilling realization settled cold in her chest. The shadows didn't just want her children. They wanted her too. Their laughter rippling through the air became louder, more chaotic. Just when she thought they were in the clear, the ground quaked. Grasping hands sprang from the earth, encircling them like vines meant to trap, and the road began to twist, contorting beneath the weight of something unseen. The beams of light from the distant town flickered, a cruel promise of safety dimmed against the chaos erupting around them. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Was this road even real? "Mom!" Jake cried, his fingers slipping from her grasp. "No!" Sarah recoiled, yanking him back just as shadows lunged forward. They swallowed the space between them, but Sarah would not let go this time. Around them, the laughter crescendoed, a cacophony of terror that threatened to tear her sanity apart. "You cannot run from us." They had escaped the dark forest, but the darkness was far from finished. What awaited them at home? A final wave of shadows rushed in, echoing promises of despair. They had awakened a nightmare, and now it was time to collect. What would happen when the sun rose? Sarah's heart thundered in unison with the creeping shadows. She had to know, was there any way to fight back, or were they doomed to the darkness forever? The pounding in Sarah's chest grew louder than the chaotic laughter, drowning out every ounce of rational thought. Gripping her children tightly, she pulled them closer, her eyes wild with trepidation. The shadows surged forward, a dark tide she felt she couldn't escape. "Mom, please," Emily begged, her voice quaking as if echoing the very fear rippling through the earth. The ground trembled beneath them, a cruel reminder of what was hunting them, impatient and ravenous. "Run, run," Sarah shouted, her voice raw as she propelled them forward. They stumbled over uneven ground, adrenaline pumping through their veins. The distant lights of the town flickered like wayward stars, promising warmth and safety, but each step felt heavier as the shadows clawed at their heels. Jake stumbled, and Sarah felt her heart lurch. "Don't let go," she screamed, pulling him up just as a shadow reached out, almost grazing his leg. The coldness surged through her, drenching her in dread. "Mom, what are they?" Jake gasped between breaths, eyes wide and glistening with terror. "I don't know," she replied, panic bubbling to the surface. "Just keep running." The laughter crescendoed around them, a discordant symphony that beckoned with sinister allure. Strange shapes flicked in and out of view, wraith-like figures weaving through the darkness, their elongated limbs twisting in unnatural ways. She could barely stomach the sight. What were they? They burst into the town, everything feeling too bright, too pristine. It was an oasis in the midst of madness. Yet Sarah remained on high alert, expecting to see shadows pooling behind her. She glanced back, her heart in her throat as she tried to catch her breath. "Why aren't they following?" Emily whispered, still breathing heavily. The streetlights hummed a soft warning, their glow stretching into the corners of dim alleyways. Sarah had never felt so exposed. The shadows hung just out of sight, lurking in the suffocating darkness that reigned beyond the glow. "I don't know," she admitted, fear gnawing at her veins. "But we're not safe. We have to get home." "Mom, I saw them taking people before," Jake confessed, his voice a mere tremor. "In the woods. I thought they were just lost." "What do you mean?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, and dread coiled in her stomach. He looked down, his brows knitted. They were crying for help, just like that woman. The vision of that ghostly figure flashed in Sarah's mind, a ripple of madness sliding through her. Could it be true? Were they all just echoes, the shadows hunting their next victims? What if they were luring innocent souls back into the darkness? A cruel game played by something ancient. "I don't want to go home," Emily cried, her eyes wide with fear. "Let us just get inside anywhere," Sarah said, ignoring the knot tightening in her chest. She motioned toward an old diner flickering just ahead, its faded neon sign a relic from better times. They dashed inside, the door squeaking loudly as they entered. The inside was musty, the dishes piled high and the lights dim but intact. For a moment, it felt comforting, almost safe from the lurking shadows. But as Sarah turned, she gasped. A figure stood behind the counter, a man, but his features were obscured, shadowed as if cloaked in darkness. He smiled, yet it didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome, travelers," he said, his voice low and smooth, like oil dripping on water. "You've come to the right place. You'll find a warm meal, or perhaps you're looking for something else." A chill raced down Sarah's spine. The room felt heavier, the shadows creeping in closer. "Mom, I don't like this," Jake whimpered, eyes darting around the diner. "We need to go," Sarah demanded, moving toward the door, but it slammed shut with a resounding thud behind her, locking them in like prey caught in a snare. "What do you want from us?" she shouted, panic edging into her voice. The man leaned closer, his smile widening, teeth gleaming in the low light. "Only your fate, just like all the others." Suddenly, a deeper laughter erupted from the shadows inside the diner. It was taunting, chilling, reverberating through the very walls. "Will you feast, or will you become part of the darkness?" Before she could react, the shadows lunged, swallowing the diner in darkness, unseen horrors crashing in like a wave. As darkness filled the room, Sarah's heart raced. Was she prepared to face what came next? What could possibly await them within the confines of that cursed place? She had gone from fleeing the shadows to entangling herself deeper into their web, and now escape felt like a distant memory. The darkness wrapped around Sarah and her children like a tightening noose. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but when the shadows lunged, their forms swirling like smoke, she found herself frozen in dread. "Mom!" Emily's tiny voice trembled, her grip on Sarah's hand tightening. The shadow man's laughter echoed, each note rich with malice. So eager to leave, are we? He stepped forward, the dim light enhancing the sharp contours of his face, revealing features that seemed to shift and flicker like flames. You're not in control here. Suddenly, disembodied whispers filled the diner, bouncing off the walls like voiceless screams of those who had come before. Help us, they sneered, the voices colluding in a deafening crescendo. Each word burned into Sarah's mind, a cruel reminder of those lost to the darkness. No, Sarah yelled, yanking her children closer, her pulse hammering in her ears. The world around them was chaos, shadows and laughter mixing like a grotesque cocktail. But her gut clenched at the thought of what might happen if they lingered. The deadly game the man described echoing in her thoughts, and a surge of desperate courage. Sarah spun around, eyes darting for an escape route. The diner felt claustrophobic, the walls closing in, seemingly pulsating with the shadows that were creeping ever closer. This way, she shouted, dragging Jake and Emily toward the bathroom in the back, a space too small for the looming terror outside. They squeezed inside, Sarah shutting the door as firmly as she could, but it rattled against the frame. Every breath felt heavy with the suffocating stench of mildew and fear. Jake whimpered again, and Sarah fought the urge to comfort him. No time for that. Mom, what is happening? He pleaded, his voice cracking. We're going to be okay. Jake, she lied, forcing a smile she didn't feel. The flickering light above them buzzed anxiously, the dim bulb casting shaky shadows against the tiled walls, each flicker amplifying the sense of dread. Suddenly, there was a thudding on the door, rattling the flimsy frame. Do you really think you can hide? The man's smooth voice slipped through the cracks, taunting, dripping with amusement. Your fate is sealed here, just like the others. No, Sarah shouted, her voice rising to a shout. She pressed her back against the door, heart pounding, but her courage felt like sand slipping through her fingers. She glanced at the children, fear evident in their wide, terrified eyes. The thudding intensified, a rhythmic drum that seemed to shake the very foundation. Emily started to keened, her small frame trembling. I don't want to be here. I can't. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Listen to me, Sarah snapped, urgency spilling over. We can't give up. We have to find another way out. As she peered through the cracked door, trying to see beyond the suffocating darkness of the diner, it hit her she had to remember the diner she saw when they first entered. The back window. If they could just. A guttural scream interrupted her thought, echoing through the diner and cutting her deep. It was shrill and raw, the very sound of despair. Please, help me, the shadows whispered back, dark and ominous. You can't help them. They're ours now. Sarah's heart stopped. The realization twisted within her like a knife. Were the lost souls those lured into the darkness? Would they share the same fate if they didn't escape? Mom! Emily cried, clutching her leg tightly, eyes wide with horror. I know, Sarah urged, forcing herself to act. We have to go. Now. She turned the knob slowly, dread heavy as lead. The thudding subsided, replaced by a pulse of silence, as if the shadows were holding their breath. On the count of 3, Sarah whispered, we run for the window. 1, 2. Just then, the door burst open. The man stood there, shadows swirling like a living cloak, the grin on his face wide and terrifying. 3, he breathed, his eyes glinting with dark intention. Before she could react, the darkness writhed and twisted around him, seeping into the diner. Their flash of escape was fading fast. Would they be taken like so many others? Was this the end or just the beginning of something even worse? A terrible dread settled in Sarah's gut as she faced the inevitable footsteps of doom. What fate awaited them as the shadows hungered for their innocence? Would they pass into the unseen, lost to time? With a final scream, the laughter of the unseen chorus filled the diner, drowning out her thoughts. And then there was silence. The silence clung to Sarah like a vice, her breath shallow and quick. Seconds stretched painfully as she stared into the man's eyes, dark pools devoid of warmth, filled only with a cruel hunger. The shadows wrapped around him like serpents, shifting and whispering, swirling with an energy that felt alive. Come now, children. Don't you want to play? He taunted, his voice smooth as silk but laced with malice that made Sarah's skin crawl. No, Sarah shouted, snapping out of her paralysis. Adrenaline surged within her, and she pushed the children behind her, almost instinctively taking on the role of protector. Each heartbeat reverberated through her bones, a drum of panic thumping against her chest. She could hear the whispers intensifying again, a chorus of chilling voices urging her to give in, to surrender hope. But she couldn't. Not now. She wrenched her gaze away from him, searching for any glimmer of an escape. The bathroom seemed impossibly small, the air thick with fear and despair. The only light flickering above them cast grotesque shadows that danced menacingly, mocking her attempts to find a way out. "Mom! He's coming!" Jake whimpered, burying his face against her side. Emily clutched his hand, her small fingers trembling with terror. "Stay behind me," she whispered fiercely, her words a fragile vow. The shadows swelled, creeping closer. A chill snaked down her spine as they writhed, eager to touch them. Just as despair threatened to drown her, she spotted the window, a faint glimmer of hope framed by cracked, dust-streaked glass. "Guys, listen," she breathed, rallying her fading courage. "We can go out the window. On the count of 3, we run. Understand?" Nods came through the tears, but fear still held them tightly. She could see it in their eyes, the uncertainty, the dread. "Ready?" she continued, steeling herself against the rising tide of darkness. 1, 2 before she could say 3, the man lunged forward, breaking through the threshold like a nightmare manifesting from shadows, his hand outstretched, fingers clawing. 3, she gasped, a burst of determination surging through her, and she grabbed Emily and Jake, pulling them toward the window. They pushed through the opening, her heart racing as they squeezed into the narrow frame. Hope flickered, but the man's laughter echoed, a chilling reminder that they were not alone. "Are you seriously trying to escape?" he hissed, his voice dripping with derision. "You have no idea what waits for you out there." Sarah could feel the cold presence creeping behind them, wrapping around her like a cold hand. Just as they were about to leap, a massive weight crashed against the bathroom door, splintering the wood and sending shards flying. In that moment, time froze, the air thick with dread. "Jump!" Sarah shouted, shoving her children toward the outside world. The last of her strength slipped away, and she turned to face the Shadow Man, the embodiment of terror looming just meters away. With one final push, the kids tumbled out into the open air, their gasps mingling with the rushing wind. She was about to follow when the man's hand shot forward, grasping her wrist in a vice-like grip. "You belong to me now," he snarled, pulling her closer. The shadows surged around them, eager to consume her like a predator ready to devour its prey. And in that moment of desperation, Sarah screamed, a raw cry fueled by fear and fury, the sound tearing through the silence of the diner. Would this scream be a final farewell, a desperate act, or a plea to the darkness itself? And just then, a blinding light shot through the bathroom, illuminating the horrific scene as if the sun itself had pierced the veil of shadows. In the brilliance, the man recoiled, his form shimmering, and with a dreadful howl he let go. As Sarah tumbled out into the night, gasping for air, she glimpsed one last terrified expression flash across his face, fear. But the freedom was short-lived. The shadows outside thickened, morphing into a tangible force as they began to rush toward her, hungry and relentless. In the distance, cries echoed. From the diner, familiar voices whispering warnings that quickened her heart. "Run!" she urged her children, but as they fled, a piercing scream erupted from behind them, one that echoed through the darkened expanse of the diner. And it wasn't just the man's laugh they heard. It was a chorus, a haunting symphony of lost souls, calling for release, mingling with their madness. And then the shadows began to swirl anew, coiling around Sarah and her children, threatening once more to pull them back into the depths. What had they truly escaped? And was this dark force truly gone, or had it merely changed its form? The fleeing warmth of the diner faded, replaced by the icy grip of the forest, which loomed ominously around them. Each step felt like a battle, and shadows danced at the edges of her vision, lurking just out of reach. Sarah could feel their cold breath at her back, sensing the darkness grow bolder as they pulled away from the cursed diner. "Mom, what is that sound?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper, deep with fear. "I don't know," she replied, glancing nervously back at the diner. Could they really have escaped? Deeper questions swirled in her mind, tangled in fear and doubt. She could feel every thundering heartbeat, each one reminding her of the shadows pulling at her resolve. Ahead, a faint light pierced through the fog, nestled along the road. A distant beacon of hope. "There! We have to make it to the road!" Sarah shouted, determination shaping her voice. Something flickered deep inside her. She couldn't let her children's promise of safety dissolve into despair. They ran, feet pounding against the ground, the fantastical weight of shadows drifting like a maddened, ravenous wind. Behind them, the eyes of the forest glowed ominously, whispers curling around them like grasping fingers you can't escape. They hissed, taunting taunts that clawed at her sanity. With each step toward freedom, the oppressive presence of the forest faded slightly, and the laughter transformed into desperate calls, echoes of lost souls that made Sarah's heart ache, a reminder of those who had not been as fortunate. Shadows twisted and writhed back into the trees, seething with dark energy, their hunger unmistakable. Sarah clutched Emily and Jacob's hands tighter. "Keep running," she urged, resting each moment on the growing certainty of salvation. The road's glimmer beckoned them like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. Each step they took steadied her courage, and a fierce resolve consumed her thoughts. They had made it this far. They would not be lost to darkness suddenly. The trees rustled violently like a storm, and the shadows roared back to life with an earth-shattering fury. A dark swarm surged forward, speeding toward them with abandon, pure malevolence mingling with laughter in a thunderous wave. "Faster!" Sarah screamed, terror curling around her voice as she pushed them toward the light. She could see the outlines of the road, shimmering faintly as if promising them safety, illuminating the path ahead. But just as they came to the edge of the trees, the ground beneath her trembled violently, the very earth trying to consume them. Jake was hurled forward, momentarily losing his grip on Sarah's hand. "Mom!" he cried out, panic twisting her stomach into knots. "Hold on. I'm right here," she shouted, lunging forward to grab him just as dark tendrils lashed at her ankles. Fierce as a beast awakening from a long slumber, she pulled him up, her resolve solid as she thrust her legs back into motion. The road was so close, a lifeline that would save them all. But just before they reached the safety of the road, an eruption of shadows burst forth from the depths of the forest, arms and twisted features seeking to ensnare them one last time. "Go! Now!" she yelled, adrenaline surging as she pushed her kids ahead, helping them to cross the threshold of darkness into the light. With one last effort and a scream born of primal fear, Sarah followed her children across the line as shadows howled in outrage behind her as they crossed. The shadows crashed against the edges of the road like waves against a barrier, snatching at the air just shy of their skin. The darkness screeched, echoing through the air, and then receded back into itself with an audible hiss, revealing the road as a barrier that kept the terrors at bay. Breathless and trembling, Sarah wrapped her arms around Jake and Emily, pulling them close. "We made it. We're safe," she whispered, tears of relief cascading down her cheeks. The weight of the shadows lifted as dawn began to split the horizon, casting soft light over the landscape. But as she looked back into the forest, flicker of movement caught her eye, a faint shape lingering just beyond the tree line, a promise that darkness never truly leaves. "Mom, are they gone?" Emily asked, her voice cracking. "I don't know," Sarah admitted quietly, squeezing her children against her. But in this moment, on this threshold of light, they had survived. Together, they would make a new life, a new beginning. Sarah felt the warmth of determination grow inside her, knowing that they had reclaimed their story and that love deep and powerful could pierce even the darkest veil. As they began to walk away, the sun rose higher, bathing everything in golden light. Felt like a promise. "Come on, kids. Let us go home," she said, holding their hands tightly, embodying a fierce hope that would keep the shadows at bay. The road stretched out ahead of them, winding toward an uncertain but bright horizon. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Sarah smiled, fiercely determined never to let shadows reclaim her family again. Subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this chilling conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this epic ending.